Hey everyone, welcome back to another video on my channel. I apologise for the background sounds. It's like 8 AM in the morning or something like that, and there's a lot of traffic on the main road, but this is all I've got to work with right now. My partner is in a meeting, and I really wanted to make this video. I've had a lot of thoughts swimming around my head for the last couple of days about relationships and in particular about personality. And I first want to say that there's so many factors that go into relationships. I'm sure everybody knows this. There's like intelligence, maturity, our upbringings, our values, like so many things that even go into our personality that cannot be and never be described by personality theories. There's, you know, past relationships, past experiences, even things like interest can be important to some people, and you know, there's just so much that goes into it, and I can't stress that enough. But I am actually in a relationship as an INTP. I'm actually in a relationship with an ENTJ, and I think that's really interesting because in so many places you see online, there will be people who, some people say that the relationship doesn't work, possibly because they've just decided it doesn't work, even if they're not one of the two types, or they've had a clash in some way with seeing that relationship that doesn't work, or there's been some mistyping or something like that. But often what I see is the INTP and ENTJ is a very high match, basically, and I would agree with that, but that is just based on personal experience. And I think I'd go as far to say that this is my perfect match of a relationship. I see what's quite common is the relationship works best with INTP females and ENTJ males, and I think that may have something to do with the power dynamic. I'm so sorry about the background noise. The power dynamic in that ENTJs, males can be seen in some lights as being leaders, you know, being the ones who are leading and are more in control, and that is definitely a more of a masculine kind of trait, whereas INTP females can be lesser so, if that makes any sense. I hope it does. Or the ENTJs can be more domineering than INTPs, and INTP males may or may not like those characteristics in a female, who knows. So that's also important, sort of like the personality type of the person, like, and their gender, or the gender or their masculine and feminine, how those roles show up in their life, shall we say. Obviously, I don't want to dismiss physical appearance. I think that is an important factor as well. I don't think you're going to be entirely attracted to someone who you don't find physically attractive at all. So I think that's a really important thing just to note as well. But I would definitely agree that myself and my partner, INTP and ENTJ, are highly compatible. So being interested in the cognitive functions, rather than what people say this personality type is always like, I think there's so much confusion, especially what I've seen on YouTube, of what people think defines each personality type, and I don't think anything really defines it other than the cognitive functions. And you can easily make assumptions based on what your cognitive functions are, but it doesn't mean that the stereotype that someone has put towards one type is going to fit everybody, and I 100% know that's true, hence why I thought I was a different type for quite a long time, and it was one of the reasons. But sort of like my partner being an ENTJ doesn't actually fit some of the things that people say he is, but he can no way be any other type. He has such strong extroverted thinking, and he has introverted intuition, and I can see those things within him very, you know, strongly, and so there's no way he could be another type. You know, sometimes I thought maybe he was an ESTJ, because he's very much very much can be in the real world, and he does bring me down to earth, but that can easily be explained by my love of abstract and theory. And you know, there's a quote that I want to share with you, that I read on a website. But basically this guy called Darryl Sharp, who's a Jungian analyst, wrote this, and I think this explains it quite well. Lacking an orientation to outer facts, introverted thinking types easily get lost in a fantasy world, and I'm always getting lost in this like fantasy world of like the abstract, and I'm always like, why do I always have to escape through my fantasy world? And I always thought that was an INFP thing, but the fact that I use reason to understand the world so much is nothing to do with FI, or so anyway, their subjective orientation may seduce them into creating theories for their own sake, apparently based on reality, but actually tied to an inner image. In the extreme cases, this image becomes all-consuming and it alienates them from others. And when I read that, I was just like, wow, that is true. And that, what I find with my ENTJ partner, he brings me down to earth, he grounds me, he brings me back to reality and the objectivity of life, basically. So I find that when I'm making rational and logical decisions, when I'm using reasoning to make decisions and to understand things, everything feels so clear to me, and it always feels like I'm doing the right thing by doing that. But sometimes I can go off into thinking things make sense to me and coming up with these ideas that don't really make sense to other people, and my partner brings me back to reality and is just like, hang on a second, and this is how this applies to the external world. Like ENTJs, like my partner is so like this, like he will literally take things as truth only if they are true to everybody in the world, you know what I mean? Like, what I mean by that is truth in the actual rational logical world. So basically he's a fountain of knowledge for me, in that he knows a lot of facts. So if I have ideas and things, I will take them to him, and he will be able to think about them in terms of how they apply in the actual world around me, and so in that way he brings me back down to earth. I have some friends who are INFPs, and I think that when I'm around them, I get so engulfed in the fantasy world when I'm around them, but ultimately I know that that's not reality. Most of the time, whenever I'm in sort of like more of my imagination and my fantasy kind of side, I find that I know deep down that these things aren't the truth, and my ENTJ partner is the person who really brings me back down to earth, and back down to reality, should I say, and grounds me. And truth and reasoning are things that are so important to me. My partner's so interesting to me. Like, I have always been drawn to him. I was always very, very accepting of him, and I knew I could trust him from one of the first moments that we met, and we became instant friends, basically. And I really admire that extroverted thinking function especially a lot, and the fact that he just has all these facts in his head he can just pull out of nowhere. Like, he just remembers all the stuff that really fascinates me, and he can draw conclusions, and I think he does this through his introverted intuition, where things just appear from nowhere. Like, my partner doesn't really have an internal monologue, and there's something that's so fascinating to me anyway, but he doesn't have this internal monologue. He can have it if he wants it, he can have it, but it's not his natural way of being, of thinking, possibly because he is an extroverted thinker, but I think there's more to it than that, and he can't create images in his mind. He has that thing where he can't actually do that, which is really interesting because I can do that so easily. And so I think in some ways that's why maybe I thought he was an ESTJ. One of the funny things about him also is that he's really into rules, and not necessarily like within our own lives, but say the COVID rules, he will stick to them 100%, and he will pretty much judge people who don't stick to them. But for some reason he doesn't fully judge me for not doing that, because I think maybe he trusts my own reasoning, I would hope, whereas I do try to stick to the rules. If I think that something doesn't make sense to me, then I will have no reason to do so, You know, like for example, in the first lockdown they were like, you can't go outside of your house, you can go outside one time for exercising, and my partner took that literally, whereas I didn't. And I did go out to places where I might not have should have gone out to, but at the same time I was just like, well, I'm causing no harm, I'm not going to catch COVID in this situation. And the only instance I could think of was if my car broke down. It's the only instance I could think of that would cause me to potentially be in contact with another person. And I was going to work anyway. But yeah, so he is really stringent on rules and things. Though I can see that other people might not like that, I kind of understand why he is that way, and I can appreciate that and respect him. And that's another thing, I have so much respect for my partner, and I think that's really key in a relationship. I know an ENTP, and like, I really like ENTPs. I get on with them so much. They have this amazing ability to just bring out my funny, silly side that nobody else does. I always feel happy around them, and I feel like I can be myself around them, just like I can with ENTJs as well. If I try and use that function and try and probe at things all the time, I find that people don't fully understand where I'm going or what I'm doing with that. But I find that ENTPs and ENTJs both really get that. I'd see ENTPs more of like a kindred spirit, shall we say, and ENTJs more as more compatible in a relationship. But ENTJs actually have like our opposing functions, but in the same stack. So, we've got TE, I've got TI, he's got TE, and so forth, like going down the stack. And that's really interesting. They say opposites attract in some ways, and you could say that we're opposite in our functions in a way, not in the full way of like being the opposite end of like the dichotomy, I guess. But yeah, so I think that's really interesting. When I met my partner, as I said, we clicked like instantly. We were friends for probably a year before we got together, and we built like a strong, solid foundation. Like, we didn't see each other much at the beginning, and then over time we started to spend more time around each other. We worked together. My partner worked a different shift to me, and then eventually he came on to my shift, so I got to spend a lot more time with him, and I got to know him, and that respect that I had just grew, and the attraction I had towards him just grew more than beyond like a friendship level. And I think that's one of the really important parts of a relationship for me and INTP, is to have somebody who is my best friend, somebody who I can feel myself around, who I can connect with, who I can debate with, and we can challenge each other. And I think that's really essential for me. And I have some friendships who I could never see that would ever go beyond just a friendship level, because I don't have that respect and that attraction to their personality. I could never see it go beyond that. And with my partner, he's the only person that I've actually ever felt this way towards. And there's not that many ENTJs in the world, unfortunately for some, and I know there's definitely not that many females, and there's not that many female INTPs, so it's going to be a struggle to find the right match. But because of that, because there's not that many, when people say there's other fish in the sea, for NTs especially, it's going to be harder to find those fish, and that's why one of the reasons I think that I've never really found that in another person before, was because I've never known anyone like my partner before, ever. Possibly, I don't even know, I think I only know one other ENTJ, and I find that our love languages, if you can use that term, like, I don't really know much about that, to be honest, but I find that they are not exactly the same, but we know how to show each other affection in ways that we like to receive affection. Like, I do not like clingy behaviour, somebody texting you all the time, needing you to be a certain way. Like, in the past I've had relationships where the other person will be upset with me because I haven't put enough kisses on the end of the text or something like that. And to me, that just makes me roll my eyes, and I just get so annoyed with that, and I just hate that kind of clinginess. I find that I have a stronger need for affection than my partner does, and if I'm feeling emotional, sometimes I can be a little bit more clingy in terms of like, don't leave me, please stay here with me. But other times, more often than not, if I am stressed, I will want to be left alone, and my partner will leave me alone. And if I am that way, he will show me affection by doing things for me. So like the other day, he cleaned out my car. You know, just things like that really shows me that he does really care about me, but it doesn't have to be done through words. Like, there's so many different ways of communicating your affection for somebody, you know, and I'm definitely not one to do it with words, and neither is my partner. And so that works like really, really well for us. Not sure how I am the other way around. I haven't really thought about that enough to really come to an answer, but my partner definitely does that for me. I'd say my partner doesn't really get stressed, hardly ever, to be honest. I think being female and having female hormones, unfortunately, and having to deal with feelings that I don't know how to deal with is probably my hugest downfall as a person. I want to be a stoic person, and I don't want to show people my emotions, and I don't want to show people, you know, it's just really hard for me to do it, basically. And when I've done it, I downplay my emotions, make out that they're a lesser deal than they are at the time, even if I'm feeling them quite strongly. I don't really have a big understanding of my own emotions, so something might bother me, and then it will play out when something else bothers me, and when it shouldn't have been a big deal, and I'm just like, maybe it was that first thing that bothered me, but I can never really fully understand it. Like, I'm just lost out there, and sometimes that means I do suppress my emotions, and they come out at times that are uncalled for. I'm not going to lie about that. And that's just the way I am, and I don't know how to stop being like that. I've always been like that, and no matter how hard I try, I can't not be like that, and it often it can lead to me feeling quite depressed sometimes. And you know, my partner just leaves me alone, leaves me to it, and that is what I prefer. And that's, you know I can rationalize it in my head that something has happened, you know, possibly I'm feeling hormonal, possibly something's bothered me, brought something up from my past that is really like bothering me, and then I can then just be alone because I don't want to act out especially in front of anybody, and I can just be left alone, and eventually it will pass, and then I will just be back to normal. And that's just the way my life seems to go in terms of emotions. But the ENTJ, my partner anyway, he doesn't really have strong emotions. He doesn't really get stressed about much at all. And I don't think that's the same for every ENTJ. I think it's always going to be different, but he doesn't really get like that. And so I find that to be grounding in itself. And if I was with somebody who was clingy and moody, and it just wouldn't work, and I couldn't deal with any of that. I'm not saying that I'm clingy, but those times when I do get emotional, sometimes I can be clingy, but I can kind of see beyond that is just my emotions. But you know, sometimes I can rationalize my feelings and they go away, and sometimes I just can't, and I have to face them, and I don't like facing them. I think because we both operate in with our thinking at the front of everything, we can really respect the other person's viewpoint and understanding of things, because we use this reasoning, whether it's, you know, my reasoning is more internal than his, but because we use this reasoning, if he tells me a reason for something, such as I don't want to buy a house this year because of this, sometimes that initially that can bother me, and I can be like, well, I see it like this, and sometimes that can bother me, but then over time I will realize that he was in fact correct, and his viewpoint was justified. I think that we've both really thought about marriage and children a little bit, but it's just not for us. No matter how many feelers tell me that is selfish, like, it's not selfish. I'm a bit touchy about that, because I'm just like, they don't understand my reasoning behind all of that. And me and my partner, like, neither of us have had huge desires for children, especially. Like, you can't just make that desire appear. If you don't have a desire for something at all, how can you suddenly make that desire appear? Like, I don't know. But because we stand in the same places on those things, and because we can reason those things and understand where the other person's coming from a place of reason and logic, I guess, it makes it really easy for us to get along. And a lot of our conversations are around sort of like, they can be around like political ideas, stuff we've seen in the news, ongoing things. Even like we talk about people, and we talk about all kinds of different things, but we really just get along really, really well talking about those things. And you know, I don't have those kind of stimulating conversations with many other people, if any, really, like not many at all. We challenge each other's ideas and thoughts and things, and it can be really interesting. I was with a censor before. I don't really know how it happened, to be honest. This was back years ago when I didn't really understand what you need to have in a relationship. Like, my parents are divorced, you know, and I just never really had that really good example of a relationship that works, I guess. And so to me, I didn't really know what a relationship should look like, and I didn't really connect with many people. I didn't have many friends because I just didn't connect with that many people. I didn't relate to a lot of people. I struggled in that way, I guess. And as I've got older, it's definitely changed. Like, I definitely get on with a whole range of people. Like, I get on with sensors as well. But anyway, back then when I was dating somebody else, and I have no idea what his type was, you know. I know he was a sensor. And he was clingy, and oh gosh, like it just never would have worked, really. It just never would have lasted ever. But it's a good example of what doesn't work with me, and how, you know, when you meet that one person who you really do respect a lot and are really attracted to, it just, the comparison of it is just like, whoa, okay, now I understand this. But you know, I couldn't be in a long-term relationship with a censor because they just want things that I can't provide. You know, I would say me and my partner in some ways are really independent. We are two people who are in a relationship, but we are not like, you know, people say like, you're like, oh, I can't think of the term, you know, like you're one together kind of thing. And even though like I tell my partner most things, and we are best friends as well as partners, I find that we still have lots of interests that are very different from each other, and we really both really like our alone time. Like, my partner is extroverted in the sense of the functions, but he also is probably one of the most introverted extroverts that are out there, you know. So we both can provide each other with our own free time when we want it. Like, I like going into the woods alone. Like, I prefer to do it alone, but my partner's not going to be all funny and be like, why don't you want to be with me during this time? Like, there's just always been that understanding of that. Like, we're both really independent. I wouldn't say we're fiercely independent, but we're both quite independent. And I see a lot of relationships who aren't like that, who are literally joined at the hip, and I just, something about that just makes me feel uncomfortable. But anyway, I've rambled on for a very long time. I probably haven't said that everything that I wanted to say at all, but I hope I gave some kind of broad overview of some of the ways that the ENTJ and INTP is a good match. And I'd love to hear your comments down below. If you have any questions for me based on this video or based on anything that I talk about online, please leave them down below, because I am gathering some questions for a Q&A video. And yeah, I will see you guys very soon.